Welcome to Shadowproof. Evidence first, noise last.
On a remote stretch of highway, a man's frantic voice crackles through the radio, his words dissolving into a wet, gurgling scream. The transmission cuts, replaced by a low, rhythmic scratching, like claws dragging slowly across the microphone's diaphragm. Then, a new voice emerges, a chilling, distorted whisper that seems to coil around the listener's ear, speaking a single, impossible sentence. It wasn't a call for help, it was a greeting. The driver's breath hitched, the air in the car suddenly thick with the smell of ozone and wet earth. He wasn't alone on that road, and whatever had used the radio was now outside his door. Here in Mercy, Ohio, the temperature reads a scorching 842 degrees Fahrenheit. The air is thick with the cloying scent of gasoline, heavy and unnatural. If you catch that sharp chemical odor, check your shoes, it might be closer than you think. We'll return after this moment. For John Miller, static was never just noise. It was a failed signal, a rupture in the air that spoke of something buried. The hiss carried the metallic scent of ozone and a faint, sickly sweetness of char. To him, the empty air was never truly empty. His night shift at the sprawling, near-abandoned Lowell Industrial Park outside Cleveland had become a symphony of his loneliness. His wife Sarah had left 6 months prior, taking all warmth and melody with him. Now, his only companions were the persistent hiss of dying fluorescent lights and the bulky, wood-paneled shortwave radio he'd salvaged from the trash, a relic he tinkered with to ward off sleep. The monitors displayed only empty hallways as John, mid-40s with weary eyes, slowly turned the radio dial. Through the speakers came fragmented transmissions, a Spanish language lesson, distant ham radio chatter, and the constant hiss of white noise. Then, at 2:17 a.m. on that Tuesday, the static shifted from empty hiss to something thick and granular. The new sound carried a strange texture, like the whisper of falling ash settling in complete silence, and through it, a voice, not faint, but buried, as if under layers of static and soil. He tuned with careful, deliberate twists, each rotation a gamble in the oppressive quiet. A metallic scent of ozone began to prickle the air, sharp and unnatural. Then, the sound clarified, a whisper, clear and cold, crawling from the speaker. Big band music warped like a record left near heat. Then the host's voice returned through the static. Host, you're listening to KMRC 98.2 on your dial, the voice of Mercy, Ohio, where the fire is always bright and the nights are eternal. John. Mercy? The radio crackled with static that smelled faintly of ozone and decay. His fingers grew cold as he scrolled through the directory on his phone. Nothing, not a single listing matched the frequency he was hearing. The air grew heavy with a silence that wasn't silent at all. The broadcast crackled with static as he scrawled KMRC MERCY on the notepad, the pen digging into the paper like a desperate plea. The host's voice returned, detached and unnervingly calm. A quick public service announcement for our listeners on Elm and 4th. The air grew thick with the scent of hot asphalt and ozone before he finished. The pavement on the corner is currently molten. We recommend the detour. The swing tune played, but a new layer emerged. The distant crackle of flames and a low, agonized moan that synced with the saxophone solo. John stared, goosebumps prickling his skin as the air grew thick with the scent of ozone and something charred. This obsession took hold. Every night at 2:17 a.m., he'd find himself drawn back to KMRC. The broadcast wasn't just music anymore. It was a doorway, and something was trying to come through. The host, calling himself the Ember, spun hits from the 40s and 50s, but the background was all wrong. A constant sound of fire filled the air. Sometimes a hearth's gentle crackle, other times the consuming roar of an inferno. He heard phantom fire bells clanging, the violent shatter of glass, and always, those faint human sounds. A stifled cough, a choked sob, a scream swallowed whole by a sudden, violent crescendo of violins. John's apartment had become a shrine to obsession. Every surface papered with maps of Ohio, the name Mercy circled like a target, and faded printouts detailing the 1952 refinery fire that claimed 147 souls. The air carried the scent of old paper and desperation, his fingers leaving faint smudges on the documents as he finally picked up the phone. He dialed the number he knew by heart, his breath catching in his throat when he heard her voice. "Sarah?" he whispered into the receiver, the word barely audible. "I know you don't want to talk. Just listen. I found something impossible. A radio station broadcasting from a town that's been ashes for 70 years. The air in my study grew thick, carrying the faint metallic scent of ozone and old dust." Sarah. "John, you're alone too much. You're hearing things." But the static-laced voice from the speaker was real, whispering a name I hadn't heard since the fire. He tried to sleep, but the broadcast began to feel interactive. One night, the static crackled, and the Ember's voice cut through. It said, "Shout out to the lonely night watchman, listening from the old Lowell place." The air grew heavy with the scent of ozone and old rock, and his breath hitched. John froze, his breath catching as he stared out the office window into the endless dark of the industrial park. His was the solitary light for miles, a tiny beacon in a vast, swallowing emptiness. The air in the room grew thick and stale, carrying a faint metallic tang. Another night, another call-in segment. The voice was thin, wavering, as if speaking through a wall of heat. Caller 1. Is anyone coming? The smoke is so thick in the hallway. I can't find my boy. We're all searching, ma'am. Keep your windows shut. The air outside is unfit for human lungs. John drove toward where Mercy had once stood. An acrid chemical stench seeped into the car, burning his nostrils. The steering wheel grew slick in his clammy grip as a low, metallic hum vibrated through the chassis. The field was now just scrubland, marked only by a single, weathered historical plaque. At 2 a.m., he set up his radio equipment inside his car, parked at the edge of the desolate site. The signal here was blisteringly clear, piercing through the static with unnatural strength. Then, through the speakers, a voice emerged, cold and deliberate. We have a visitor at the edge of town, folks. The road stretched before him, a thin ribbon through the whispering dark. Look, but don't step off, the voice had warned. The ground has a memory, and it's hungry. Inside his car, John's knuckles were white on the wheel. A sudden searing wave of heat washed over him, thick and suffocating, like opening an oven door in a sealed room. The scent of ozone and hot, dry earth filled the cabin, metallic and ancient. It was a heat with weight, pressing in from all sides, making the air itself feel dense and hostile. His breath hitched, caught in a throat gone dry as dust. This was no desert sun. This was a breath from something buried, exhaling a forgotten, ravenous warmth. The car's interior became a stifling oven, thick with the acrid scent of kerosene and burnt sugar. His fingers trembled, clumsily silencing the radio, and the sweltering heat evaporated in an instant. The next night at work, John moved through the halls like a phantom, a ghost among the living. A heavy, metallic odor clung to the air, and every surface felt unnervingly damp to the touch. He brought the radio. At 2:17 a.m., it clicked on by itself. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of ozone and old dust. The Ember's voice was different, solemn, final. Host. Our final broadcast. The fire department has declared this a lost cause. The town is going under. For our loyal listener, this is where we sign off. A mournful, slow version of We'll Meet Again begins to play. The air grows thick with the smell of ozone and damp rot, as if the town itself is exhaling its final breath. But beneath the surface, the horror reached its terrible crescendo. The fragmented sounds John had been hearing now fused into a single, devastating symphony of destruction. Timber groaned and splintered. Gas mains ruptured with a sickening hiss, and a chorus of terrified voices rose and fell in time with the music. And through it all, the Ember's voice, now a whisper, seeped directly into the microphone. You're here now, aren't you? You feel the oppressive heat pressing against your skin, a tangible weight in the air. You can smell it. The sharp, metallic scent of ozone laced with something older, like damp earth and rust. You left your door open, John. The cold seeped into his bones, a different kind of fire. The loneliness was absolute, he sobbed, pressing his hands against his ears, but the voice was inside his skull. Sarah left, because your life was already ash, empty, quiet. Isn't this better, to feel something, even if it burns? The air grew heavy, thick with the metallic scent of old iron. A cold, damp chill seeped through the floorboards. Then, a faint scratching began, dry, insistent, like bone on wood from somewhere below. His breath hitched, a primal dread took hold, rooting him in place. This quiet wasn't peace. It was an invitation. John, stay with us. We have a forever show. Just turn up the dial.
On the security monitors, the empty hallways of Lowell Park begin to ripple. The distortion is not heat haze, but a deep, oily undulation that smells faintly of ozone and decay.
The fluorescent lights dimmed, shifting from orange to a deep crimson glow. John's nostrils flared at the unmistakable scent of burning wood and insulation. On monitor 3, a faint amber flicker illuminated the distant end of a warehouse aisle. A silhouette stood framed by growing flames as the host's voice echoed through the room itself. Come on in, John. The flames burned with an unnatural, unwavering brilliance, casting stark shadows across the endless night. John's mind swam in a murky soup of terror and hopeless despair. His hand, slick with cold sweat, trembled violently as it reached for the radio's volume knob. The air itself felt thick and heavy, tasting of ozone and something metallic, like old blood. He cranked the volume, and the sound of the inferno surged through the room, a roar that felt almost physical. On the screen, the shadowy silhouette took a deliberate step forward, its movement unnervingly smooth. Then, with a sharp pop, every light in the office died, plunging him into an absolute darkness broken only by the radio's malevolent, rhythmic glow. The air grew thick with the scent of ozone and a creeping, palpable dread. Sarah stood with the officer in Lowell's security office, the air frigid enough to sting the lungs. John's chair lay toppled on the floor, a silent testament to the struggle. The old radio occupied the desk's center, its cord coiled with unnatural neatness beside the unplugged wall outlet. The officer's voice cut the cold silence. No signs of forced entry. There was no evidence of a fire, Despite the frantic call that brought them here, the surveillance footage simply shows him sitting at his desk, then rising and walking calmly out the door into the empty parking lot. After that, nothing. The footage shows only the vacant lot and the static hum of the empty channel. Sarah, with tears welling in her eyes, reached out and touched the cold, silent radio receiver. On a sudden impulse, she plugged the device in. The dial glowed to life with a soft, unsettling orange light. She hesitated for only a moment before turning the knob. What emerged from the speaker wasn't static or a normal broadcast. It was a low, guttural whisper that seemed to coil in the air like smoke. From somewhere in the dark, the faint, distorted melody of a big band tune drifted in, warped by time and static. Beneath it lay a whisper of persistent, papery crackle. Then, a voice, so threadbare it seemed to bleed from the walls themselves, blending with the music. Post. On KMRC, Mercy, Ohio. Our next request is for Sarah. From John. He says he's warm at last. Sarah's hand snapped back as if scorched by a live wire. A faint scent of ozone and something metallic, like old blood, hung in the sudden stillness. Then, the radio's hum died completely, leaving only the hollow sound of her own ragged breath. Sarah stared at the officer, her face ashen and drained, her voice barely a whisper. She asked what had happened here. The officer shook his head slowly, closing his notebook with a final, heavy thud. Sometimes, he murmured, people just burn out. And Sarah's car vanished into the fog-shrouded darkness. On the passenger seat, her phone suddenly illuminated with a notification from a digital radio app, the screen casting an eerie blue glow across the dark interior. She remained oblivious to the device as the camera pushed into the vacant security office, where shadows clung to every corner. On the desk, the radio's frequency dial glowed with an unnatural amber light that pulsed once, briefly illuminating the abandoned space. The light vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving behind only the scent of ozone and the heavy silence of the empty room. A faint, choked cry dissolved into a weary exhalation, mingling with the ceaseless, low crackle of an undying flame. Some signals aren't meant to be found. What are you listening to in the static?
If the proof convinced you, subscribe and open the next case.